In the spring of 1865, the United States stood on a fragile edge between exhaustion and hope. The Civil War, a conflict that had torn the nation apart for long and bloody years, was finally ending. Everywhere, people felt a strange, unfamiliar feeling, a mix of profound relief and deep uncertainty. Soldiers were starting to come home, their faces aged by battles we can hardly imagine. Telegraph offices, once the bearers of grim casualty lists, now carried good news. Church bells, which had so often tolled for funerals, now rang out for peace. At the very center of this pivotal moment stood President Abraham Lincoln. He was a tall, tired man whose face seemed to carry the immense weight of hundreds of thousands of deaths. Yet, when he spoke, his words were not of triumph or revenge, but of forgiveness. He firmly believed the country could not survive another cycle of hatred. He spoke passionately about binding up the nation as wounds and treating former enemies not as traitors, but as neighbors once again. Many Americans didn't agree with him. The pain was too fresh, the anger too deep. But many more desperately wanted him to be right. They longed for the peace he promised. As news spread that the main Confederate army had surrendered, Washington City erupted in celebration. Crowds gathered outside the White House, cheering and calling for speeches. Lincoln stepped onto the balcony, but not to boast about the victory. He spoke calmly, his focus already on the monumental task of rebuilding the shattered country. He even suggested a revolutionary idea for the time: limited voting rights for some formerly enslaved black men. This shocked many listeners and enraged others. Somewhere in that very crowd, a famous actor named John Wilkes Booth listened with a growing, venomous fury. In his mind, the president hadn't saved the Union. He had destroyed the South and overturned the world as Booth understood it. Booth wasn't some poor, desperate fanatic. He was a well-known, even beloved performer, admired for his dramatic stage presence and his confident charm. But beneath that public persona, he carried a deep and poisonous resentment. He believed the Confederacy had been humiliated, not defeated fairly. He convinced himself that killing Lincoln would somehow restore honor to the South and ignite a new wave of resistance. He had originally plotted to kidnap the president, but the war ended too quickly, forcing his plans to turn darker, more desperate, and ultimately deadly. Just a few days later, on the evening of April 14, 1865, Good Friday, Lincoln decided to attend a comedy play at Ford's Theater. He hoped the laughter might lift his wife Mary's spirits. She had suffered terribly during the war, losing a son and living in a state of constant fear and anxiety for her husband's life. The president had spent a long day signing papers and meeting with officials. He was exhausted and nearly canceled the theater outing, but changed his mind at the last moment. It was a small decision, a simple change of plans, but one that would echo through history forever. The theater was packed, people were excited to see both the popular play and the president himself. The atmosphere was light, celebratory, and safe. The war was essentially over. The danger that had loomed for so long finally seemed distant. Security was shockingly casual by today's standards. Lincoln's bodyguard, a man named John Parker, actually left his post at the door of the presidential box during the show to get a drink at a nearby saloon. This lapse gave Booth the opening he needed. He knew the theater intimately, the layout, the hallways, the timing of the play itself. He entered easily, carrying a small, single-shot pistol and a dagger. He moved with practiced patience, waiting for the perfect moment. He knew the script by heart and listened for a specific line that always drew a huge laugh from the audience, a laugh loud enough to mask the sound of a gunshot. At around 10:15 p.m., the moment arrived. The actor on stage delivered the famous line, and the audience burst into laughter. Under the cover of that sound, Booth slipped silently into the presidential box, aimed his pistol at the back of Lincoln's head, and fired. For a split second, the sharp crack of the gun blended with the audience's joy, a horrifying harmony of life and death. Then the screams began. Booth, a man of dramatic flair, leapt from the box down to the stage below. He injured his leg in the fall but still managed to shout a theatrical Latin phrase, Sic semper tyrannis, thus always to tyrants, before escaping through a rear door into the dark streets, where a horse was waiting for him. Inside the theater, chaos reigned. The initial confusion gave way to horrified realization. Doctors in the audience rushed to the president's side. They knew immediately that the wound was fatal, but they refused to give up. They carried Lincoln's long, limp body across the street to a humble boarding house, the Petersen House. There, they laid him diagonally across a bed that was too small for his tall frame. As the night wore on, government officials gathered in the small room, their faces etched with stunned silence and disbelief. Throughout the long, agonizing night, Lincoln's breathing grew slower, shallower. Outside, soldiers stood guard while crowds of citizens gathered, whispering prayers and trading anxious rumors in the dark. The hope that had filled the city just days before had evaporated, replaced by a cold, numbing dread. At 7:20 the next morning, Abraham Lincoln died. In the quiet of the room, Secretary of War Edwin Stanton reportedly uttered the now famous words, "Now he belongs to the ages." The news of his death spread across the nation faster than any message had ever traveled before, carried by the clicking telegraph wires. Grief swept the country like a shockwave. Hardened soldiers, men who had faced death on the battlefield, wept openly. Black Americans, both newly freed and those long free, gathered in churches, their joy at emancipation now clouded by a profound fear for their uncertain future. Newspapers printed their pages with thick black borders, a visual testament to the nation's mourning. Meanwhile, John Wilkes Booth fled south, fully expecting to be welcomed as a hero. Instead, he found fear and rejection. No one wanted to be associated with the president's killer. For 12 long days, he was a fugitive, hunted relentlessly by thousands of Union soldiers. They finally cornered him in a tobacco barn in Virginia. When he refused to surrender, they set the barn on fire. In the ensuing chaos, a soldier shot and killed him. His desperate escape was over, but the consequences of his act were just beginning. Lincoln's death did more than just kill a man, it killed a possibility. It removed the one leader who seemed capable of guiding the nation through a gentle and forgiving reconciliation. In his absence, the country soon entered a harsher, more bitter period of Reconstruction. The political battles that followed were, in many ways, as vicious as the real ones. Mistrust hardened into decades of tension and division. His funeral train carried his body on a long, slow journey back to Illinois, retracing the path he had taken to Washington as president-elect. Millions of Americans stood silently beside the railroad tracks to pay their respects. Some saluted, some cried, some simply stared, as if trying to comprehend how the promise of peace had turned into such a profound tragedy in a single night. The assassination did more than kill a president. It changed the very direction of the nation's healing. At the precise moment when hope was beginning to dawn, America lost the one man who seemed best able to protect it. The echo of that single gunshot in Ford's Theater would continue to shape American history long after the theater itself went quiet. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, please like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into history's most critical moments.